Okay, I think we'll get a start. And in order to maximize the use of our time, I'd really like to ask you guys how much you know about county government. So I know how much of a background I sort of need to gauge. So why don't we'll go around and ask each person individually, like what you might say, how much you know about county government. So we'll start with you, Teresa.
Well, I know we have a county board that's pretty powerful. That's, has Democrats and Republicans. I know we've just elected and started this county executive way of governing, which we hadn't had before. We're only two counties, I think, in the state that have this. I know that I think I elect 2 people to the county board. And what else? I don't want to take too long. That there are elected positions, and we just got rid of one of these positions because person who ran for it said really wasn't necessary to have someone being paid $90,000 a year to do, I think it was recorder of deeds, right? So anyway.
Pat, what would you say, would you know things in addition to that?
Probably what Teresa knows, and then I know quite a bit more about the mental health board just because of working at Family Service.
So you know that the county board has a relationship with the mental health board, which is they appoint the members, but and I guess they probably approve the budget, but they don't actually raise tax funds for it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, actually they do.
Do they?
They levy the property tax for the mental health board and the disability.
Oh, that's right. There was a referendum.
Board.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Kathy, how about you? You want to?
I think Teresa, I would probably, my understanding probably falls into the category with what Teresa covered.
Okay, and Sally?
Probably as much as what Teresa said, but I would not have been able to articulate it, so I probably don't understand it that well.
Okay. Carol?
I actually feel like I have a pretty good understanding, which makes me kind of nervous, since some of these really smart women are saying they don't. So maybe I don't have a good understanding, but I kind of feel like I do.
So, okay. Would you want to add anything to our base of information here about what you know? How about this? Do you know your county board members?
Oh, no. Good question. Yeah.
I do not.
Okay, Judy, how about you? Do you know what
I would say that I probably know less than what most of you do that are on tonight. As a relatively recent dual citizen, I have been shockingly unaware of a lot of things going on in local government.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason that I'm a member.
Okay, Anne, how about you?
In addition to what everybody else has said, the one thing that I had assumed that, and it's incorrect, is that the county offices, like county clerk and all the others, would report to the county board, but they don't.
Yeah.
They report to the voters. I was trying to figure out what role the county board had in terms of sort of nudging the county officers to do certain things. And yes, they do approve important things, but they don't have any control over who holds those positions.
Right. And that is that's a very traditional sort of 19th century structure, and the source of a great deal of conflict. And Cecile?
I tuned in late, so I'm not exactly sure. Actually, I do not know who my county board representative is.
Yeah. And actually, I don't blame anybody for that. I don't know who my county board representative is.
I feel slightly comfortable with all the positions, and I feel happy to think about them as they are and vote for whom I think might do the best job.
Okay, Sue? Do you think you know anything additional, or you're basically at that set of stage of knowledge?
I don't know who my county board people are, no.
And Rhonda?
I think the interesting part for me is that I've worked with several members of so in my job, many of my coworkers have been members of the county board. So I hear about things about I didn't realize that they were involved in the county jail and, paying for that, right? And other things. And I think I'm always concerned because I feel like in some ways they were sort of the precursor to what we're seeing in national government. That they didn't get along. That was what I taught, so I mean, not only is there the what's going on with this administrator versus the president of the board, but also just sort of the kind of the infighting that happens. So sorry to be, that's always sort of amazing to me, really, for the county board. So sorry.
That also has a long history, and it's very public. I mean,
yes,
you listen to a county board meeting and they're really nasty to each other.
Yes, and that's why I don't like to. So sorry.
Claudia?
I don't know that I have anything to add. I do know who my county board representative is. But that's about all. I guess my interest in this survey goes back to the fact that when we were asked the questions to vote on about what kind of county government we wanted, I don't think people understood that if you voted one way, it automatically triggered the other. I can't remember how the two questions were phrased, but I think people I didn't realize anyway, that if we voted not to have.
If you voted for the executive, then that overruled that, even if more people voted for the countywide board.
Exactly. Yes. So that was confusing. Thank you for, I couldn't remember what it was, but I knew it wasn't what it didn't make sense. Or I think, and I don't think people were aware that would happen.
Yeah.
So, and I also think, that it is confusing, Urbana, Champaign, the city governments, but then the county, and also the county is much more than Champaign, Urbana.
Yeah.
And so what exactly does the county board do and all of that? So,
okay.
And I do think the
we'll
issues,
cover some of that. Yeah. Grace, how about you? You want to say anything, or you don't have to? Just if you don't want to, then we'll just skip you. And Carl, if you want to say anything.
I don't really have anything to add. Thanks.
Okay. And Carl, then I guess we'll just get into the presentation. So I'm hoping what you see is something that says county governance issues. I would recommend, if some of this PowerPoint is covered up by the gallery view, you can reduce that. So if you want to do that, go ahead. So what does county government do? And so we're gonna start with some of these basics, just to give everybody sort of the same grounding here. So it provides services similar to that the cities provide to those people who don't live in cities. And this is referred to as the unincorporated areas. And it provides certain services to all members of the county. And so the total county population, and this is, I'm not sure if it's been updated for the last census, but at least it's pretty close to that, is a little over 200,000, and about 32,000 people live in the unincorporated part. So in the unincorporated, they do roads and bridges, land use. They provide the sheriff's services. It is basically police to the unincorporated. For all citizens, you have, the county does a lot of funding of the court system. It provides the money for the courthouse, for the jail, for salaries for a great many of the offices. The coroner, which does death investigations, the county clerk, a record keeper and election authority, treasurer, who does the billing and collection for property taxes and some other county taxes, auditor, who does auditing and also serves as the county's accountant. So they review bills and things like that. And the supervisor of assessments and board of review. So that's an integral part of the property tax system, the assessment part. So, oops. Let's see, I thought we had. So people, citizens observing the county board, basically have seen a lot of dysfunction and dispute. The county treasurer, for instance, the last year or so has been very late in collecting taxes and forwarded in money. So school districts, for instance, may have to borrow money to waiting for their taxes. The auditor has not completed audits on time, and the federal government, for instance, has stopped paying its federal funds for programs such as Head Start and other things until an audit was completed. And we've seen the disputes between the county executive and the county board that filed lawsuits, one of which it's in the Supreme Court, Illinois Supreme Court now. So in serious disputes. So Deb and I, and let's just to give a little bit of background, I worked for the county as an assistant state's attorney for 10 years in the 1980s. Yeah, I can't believe it's so long ago. And so sort of I had a firsthand view of the different kinds of disputes and the sort of dysfunction. So it's not a recent thing. It's certainly been around for many years. And Deb, you want to describe your history with the county?
I had a 41-year career at Champaign County, and the first 20 years was in the state's attorney's office, and then I moved to administration. I was a deputy county administrator for a year and a half, and then for the next basically 18 years, county co-administrator for the first 9 years, and then county administrator for the remaining years.
Okay, and so can you just describe a little bit of what the county administrator did and who you reported to and that kind of thing?
So the county administrator is hired by the county board. This is a position that is used in most counties of any amount of size because, and we'll talk about structure later, but the administrator is basically responsible to carry out the day-to-day operations of county government on behalf of the county board and in compliance with all of the policies and the directives that the county board sets. And while I was administrator, we had an annual budget of $125 million, and we had about 1,000 employees. So not all of those fall directly under the jurisdiction of the administrator and county board. Some of those employees fall under the direction of the elected officials, the sheriff, treasurer, county clerk, coroner, auditor. Those elected individuals are responsible for their own staff, and then like the mental health board, some of the regional planning commission, those boards and commissions manage their operations, but then the county administrator manage the balance of the operations on behalf of the county board.
All right, and the consensus process that we started last year I think both Deb and I wanted to start this process because we wanted to be in a position to make logical decisions about proposals that might come on the ballot for changes at the county board at level or at the elected officials. Because we didn't have a position, the league essentially couldn't advocate for anything, couldn't say, well, we believe that you should abolish the office of coroner or something like that, because we didn't have a study. So he wanted to be in a position to be able to discuss and advocate for certain things if we had decided that they were necessary. So we started the study. We had a task force with Deb and I as co-chairs. We had league members on there and community members. And want to give a thank you to Kathy Emanuel, who's been writing articles about the county government for the voter during this last year in order to bring us up to a point where we might be able to really discuss these things and vote on them. So we did some fundraising specifically for this to start the process with a consultant study, sort of to give ourselves a kind of a basis of professional facts about counties across the state and county government and how it works. And we asked them to look at four different things. To look at elected auditor versus appointed auditor, elected coroner versus appointed coroner, and about the two forms of county government used by most of the larger counties. And we'll talk about those two forms are the elected county executive or the countywide elected board chair. We did not ask the consultants to make recommendations because we believe that recommendations, what to support, are things that the league members need to come to after looking at the facts and the conclusions. And just why we picked those offices to look at is the treasurer, sheriff, and county clerk by the Illinois Constitution must be elected. So what we wanted to focus on are the kinds of changes that voters could make. So coroner and auditor by statute could be appointed offices. So and they could be eliminated after a referendum vote. So this is something that voters could do. So we're going to do auditor, coroner, and then county board. So the question of whether to eliminate the auditor's office has been on the ballot, I don't know, maybe 2 times, and has not, in both cases, the league did not have a position, so it didn't make any public comments, but it's certainly possible for this to be on the ballot again, so we wanted to look at it. So if anybody has any questions as we're going along, then feel free to interrupt me because obviously I can't see you, but I want to make sure that people are following along and I'm not hurrying through things too fast. So what should an auditor, what should an auditor be? An auditor is a professional, right? He's doing accounting and auditing. In counties, the auditor also provides a lot of day-to-day services that in terms of reviewing and paying bills and things of that nature. So because the auditor is part of this whole financial system, the competency of the auditor affects the day-to-day operations of the county. Obviously, if someone's not paying bills on time, it can affect the supply situation for the sheriff or the county board office or something like that. So in the last 20 years, Champaign County has had an auditor who rarely came to work, but was reelected because the public had little knowledge or interaction with the auditor. And Champaign County has not had its annual audit completed on time for the last 6 years. And that has had some adverse effects. So, let's talk about auditor a little bit more then. So, you know, Deb, I don't think this is,
Right version.
this is not the final version that we worked on last night. So,
No.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If the position was appointed rather than elected, would it be the county board that would appoint or someone else that would appoint?
That is a very, very good question. If the auditor position was eliminated, the statute says that the county board is in charge. It has to do sort of the reorganization. Where do those functions get placed? But as to who would be appointing the auditor, that's probably maybe settled by the decision in the the Illinois Supreme Court case that's going on right now. So I'm gonna exit out of this, and Deb, we'll see if you can you pull up your screen, can you do some screen sharing? We'll see.
Okay, let's see.
You'll have to make Deb a co-host, Teresa.
Do I need to have it open to share it, Trish?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, it's open.
So
share screen. Did it work?
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Let me see. Multiple, all right, so we go to participants. Boy, sorry, this is, I cannot. Here we go, okay. Deb Busey, more. Okay. That might do it.
Except that I don't know how to do this and I've lost my Zoom.
Let me, I'm going to take a look at, see if I can find the
If you can pull up on your screen, Deb, the PowerPoint you want.
I have it up on my screen, but now I
Do
have
you
it
see
on my,
that little green thing down at the bottom?
I don't know where my Zoom meeting is now. I have my PowerPoint up and I'm in PowerPoint, but now I'm not in Zoom.
Do you have that little Zoom
It might be behind
camera
you.
down on the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should have checked this before. I apologize, people.
Okay. Now I'm back. Now, what do I hit?
Down at the bottom of the screen, there's a little green thing that says share screen. It's all the way at the bottom of below our pictures.
Okay, I select a window or an application that you want to share.
There you go. And so it's
Share.
there. You
There.
go.
Is that it?
Yep, you got it. You're on there.
Okay.
So you go to slide. You go from beginning at the click from beginning on the slideshow.
Okay.
And click that.
Do I click slideshow first there?
There you
There
go.
we got it. Okay, so catch us up to auditor.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
The next one.
No, this one.
Okay.
So one of the things in the bellwether study, they indicated one of the concerns about having an appointed auditor is that the auditor sometimes has to step up and say, you know, somebody's doing something wrong. And a elected official has a great deal of independence and not much downside to actually making a public statement like that. So the idea is that maybe an elected auditor is more independent and an appointed auditor might not be as comfortable pointing out the problems. But when we looked at this closely, though, there are ways in the contract process to make sure that the auditor is comfortable has some independence. And in addition, the county has an independent audit that is done by an outside audit group, like all government bodies do. So we thought it was not necessarily the most, that was really not a determining factor. So Deb, can you go to the next one? You have to.
It's up, isn't it? History of elected auditors.
Yeah, it's up, but you have to go to the next screen. You have control over going to. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. But the one thing that was really clear is that people don't know what the auditor does, and they don't know if they does a good job or a bad job. And we've had direct experience of that, or several auditors in Champaign County. So to our mind, and these are problems with the professionalism, and it's problems with an independent elected official. If you have an auditor who never comes to work, the county board cannot do anything about that. They cannot fire an auditor. The only thing that can be done is wait for the 4 years of the election term to be up and to hope that the election process will allow the voters to recognize the qualities necessary and to make a good decision. The problem being that the voters generally have very little information about the auditor. And so next slide. So the task force preliminary recommendation is to support a referendum abolishing the office of elected auditor. And then the auditing functions would be taken care of in at some place in the structure of the county. The statutes don't say where, but it does say that the county board arranges or decides where these go. So any questions about this so far?
Trisha, I have one, if you don't mind. My understanding is that it's the county exec now that has kind of the responsibility for administrative functions of the county. Does this create a conflict if the auditor position is eliminated and then the functions of an auditor would be assigned by the county board, not by the county exec?
It could. Presumably the county board would be interested in having the functions done effectively, and that should be at least the county board and the county executive aren't at odds over everything, so we would hope that they could be reasonable about this. Bonnie?
I think I would just add too that it's another example of where the statutes are not clear about the differences between elected executive and county board responsibilities, because where the statute talks about replacing an elected auditor, it states that the county board is the decision maker in how those functions are then assigned. And I think you could argue that, does that automatically go to the elected executive in that form of government? I think that would be a question if we reach that point.
Bonnie, you have a question?
I do. Auditing today, in past history, auditing always referred to financial auditing, but auditing today often refers to process auditing, organizational structure auditing. Number one, based on what happens here, obviously the county auditor has not been doing that because the county auditor's not been doing the financial, but is it possible, feasible, or it even under discussion that auditing might be expanded to include other things besides financial?
Right now, the duties of the auditor are set by the statute, and they're basically financial. Expanding those would be certainly possible if the office was eliminated and they were restructuring it somehow.
Okay, thank you.
But some of those things that you pointed out, Bonnie, would not be, you could not make elected officials subject to those kinds of audits if they chose not to participate.
Oh, is that right? Interesting. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot.
I have a question.
Teresa.
So if the current auditor is not getting stuff done on time, does it mean the job is too onerous for one person? I mean, what's going on?
Well, the auditor has a staff. It's not a one-person office. Previous auditors have managed to get the job done. I guess that's.
So
for decades, the auditor got the job done all the time.
Okay, so it's a bit like the one that we eliminated where the staff was really doing the stuff. Treasurer, was that the one we just? Recorder. So the staff was doing the work and didn't really need someone being paid $85,000 to oversee them.
Well, you still need a supervisor, but that supervisory responsibility was basically, immersed into the county clerk's office.
Okay.
But the auditors, presumably you would want an effective auditor, and that's one of the aspects of being able to appoint someone is you could look for someone who has professional qualifications and also job experience and those kinds of things. And if that person wasn't doing the job, then you could fire them. This is the basic difference between appointed and elected. If someone isn't doing the job, they can be fired if they're appointed, but they can't be fired if they're elected.
So with doing away with abolishing the office of elected auditor, is the thought then that someone would be appointed? Or that just the staff in that office would pick up the work or whatever and continue?
Be in charge.
The statute says the county board determines what, how it's restructured and where those duties go. Bonnie? Your hand is still up. Is that just the same question? Oh, okay.
Trisha?
Yeah.
It sounds like your task force is recommending abolishing the office of auditor rather than going for an appointed auditor. And I'm just wondering, what are your main reasons for that recommendation?
No, we're supporting abolishing the elected auditor. The appointment of how it would be handled from there, who would be doing the work of the auditor. The statute does say that the county board would be in charge of that, and there could be an appointed auditor, someone basically under contract doing those functions.
I guess I'm curious, given the dysfunction on the county board, why would we want to not make a strong recommendation that the auditor position should exist and should be appointed rather than leaving the whole thing up to the county board?
That's a sort of an organizational development question that may be impacted by by things that happen by different ways that are needed. Deb, how about helping me out there?
Okay, there is, we're just talking about eliminating the position of an elected auditor. Those responsibilities still exist. accounting, auditing, day-to-day financial, kinds of operations of the county. The county board might decide to hire a CPA to assume the job and run the current office. But the county board could also decide to create a finance division. And currently there's a deputy executive who's responsible for the budget development in the elected executive's office, which is a completely financial, similar to auditing. So the county board might create a finance division and hire a department head for the finance division, which would take care of budgeting, auditing, accounting, all of those kinds of financial responsibilities that would then fall under the county board if there were not an elected auditor. So that's why we're not being specific, and the statutes, again, make it pretty clear, you're not eliminating or abolishing the office, you're eliminating or abolishing the elected position. And then those responsibilities still need to be managed, and typically managed and, structurally defined by the county board, how it will all work.
More questions? Any more questions?
I just feel compelled to say that I think things have been better since George Danos has taken over as auditor.
Yeah.
It's really not about individuals. I think we really have to look at this from the perspective of structurally what provides the best potential.
I know that's the question, but we keep saying, the auditor has been problematic for the last whatever years. I just wanted to throw out there that there have been improvements in that particular position, even though I know that's not the question.
I guess I would just like to add to what Ann said, and then I feel like might be worthwhile looking at recommending the appointment of an auditor. My experience in organizations is that if the auditor is not can't function fairly independently and isn't at a pretty high level, they can't be very effective. And as Ann said, given the dysfunction sometimes of the county board, I think it might be important to make sure that an auditor was appointed and what their reporting responsibilities were and their level of independence, because otherwise if it's too low down in the organization, they can't be very effective, is my experience. In fact, the organizations I worked for, the auditor reports directly to the CEO and to the board usually, both, because obviously if they just reported CEO, they'd be kind of at the whim of the CEO.
And that's the kind of thing that would be determined by a contract with an individual to assume responsibility for these areas. Or I know that you all see a lot of dysfunction in the county board, but the county board also adopts policies that direct how personnel are to be managed. They approve job descriptions, they approve the structural, relationships between positions. And that all, when it says that these responsibilities would go to the county board, it would be within that kind of structure that tends to be less controversial. I mean, you don't ever hear about this, and yet I can tell you all these things exist, and the county board does approve their personnel policies and salary administration system and job positions and the structure for those positions. So that all the concerns that you just stated would be taken into consideration if there were not an elected auditor.
Okie doke. We will, however, definitely take into account what people are saying here when we finalize the task force recommendations. So
yeah,
so that's the purpose of this discussion, is to provide your input and educated information. So
yeah, I just wanted it to be clear, though, that under the statute, the voters can decide whether or not the auditor is elected, And if it's not elected, then the statute dictates that those responsibilities are defined. I mean, the voters can't then adopt another position that tells the county board how to do it. That's determined by the statutes.
Okay, let's go next. Deb, you have to.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so coroner. The coroner interacts with the public, unlike the auditor, and the public has a good understanding, I think, of what the coroner does. You know, it deals with death certificates and determinations of causes of death. So the coroner's competence doesn't impact other county offices the way the auditor does. And the change to a medical examiner system would result in a dramatic increase in costs. A medical examiner has to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And so it's been found in other counties, the pool of candidates can be very, very limited for medical examiners. So the office also has much of its responsibilities are working with law enforcement, which is not something that doctors would traditionally have a lot of experience with. So next slide. So our preliminary recommendation is that there's no change in the current system. We would not recommend a referenda that the coroner be abolished and the office be abolished, and that so any questions about that? Kathy, you have a hand up? Kathy Emmanuel, is your hand still just, you want to put it down?
No, sorry, I should have taken it down.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anybody else have any other questions about the coroner?
Well, I think, does the question come up for coroner is the same as auditor, that you want to make sure you have someone in the position that has qualifications? Because couldn't you end up with an elected person who really isn't qualified to handle that job because it is quite demanding?
It's certainly possible. We have not had, in Champaign County, the coroner has been traditionally been pretty competent. I mean, has been competent. There's been no quarrels, no disputes about the competence of the coroner that I have ever been able to recall in 30 years. So I think it appears to attract the kind of person who has law enforcement experience more than medical experience. And but I think one of the major factors is it would definitely increase costs dramatically, just because you have to have a doctor instead of what is often, a former police professional or something like that.
And one other point too is that under the statutory requirements, there are more educational requirements and certification requirements placed on the coroner than are placed on the auditor position or that were placed on the recorder position. So of those 3 elected positions, the coroner actually does have to complete some education and training to hold the position once they're elected.
The auditor has no requirements, pre-existing requirements for for being eligible to be elected, but has a requirement for 20 hours of study after he's elected. Well, I think we would all agree that 20 hours is not enough time to become familiar with accounting and auditing principles if you don't go in there with those skills and experiences already present. Yeah, Anne?
Are you saying that really there are only 2 choices for these positions? Either you stick with an elected coroner, auditor, or you turn everything over to the county board? No?
Well, for the coroner, if you don't have an elected coroner, the county board's required to hire a medical examiner.
Is that in statute, Deb, that you're required to hire a medical examiner?
Yes.
So really, there are only two choices, right? I was going for whether there could be an appointed coroner, not an appointed medical examiner.
No, the statute clearly specifies a medical examiner.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions about coroner? And, you know, I think one of the advantages of being able to have some time to study this is you can see the differences between these different offices. I mean, there are reasons why, these are reasons why you might have a different opinion on one versus the other. And I think one of the reasons why we wanted to have some time to do a study. It's typical for these issues to be placed on the ballot at very short notice. And there's only maybe a couple of months before the election. And that's not time usually for the league to have a study and take a position. It's not much time to educate the public about the issues either. Okay, let's go next.
So the next area we're going to talk about is the elected county executive versus the countywide elected board chair. And as we've mentioned, in 2016, the voters were presented with two referendum propositions. One was to change from the current system where the board chair is elected by the board members from among the board members, to a system where the board chair is a separate position and elected countywide with all voters in the county voting for him. And this proposition passed by 58% of the voters said yes. The second question was whether to change from the current system of the board chair selected by the board members to a system where a county executive is elected countywide, and 50.2% said yes. Now, going from the board chair selected by the board members or board chair elected countywide all falls under the same statutory sites for county board. But going to a system with elected executive changes the statutory oversight for county government. And because it was a change in the type of government and it passed by a majority of the voters, that question took precedence and we moved to the county executive form of government. It was pretty clear that the voters were interested in a change in leadership for the county board, but there was little to no education about these two systems or an understanding of what the voters were voting on when they voted in 2016. So currently in Illinois, 92 Illinois counties use the system of board members electing the board chair from among their members. And the average population of those counties is 41,929. 7 Illinois counties use the system of countywide elected board chair. The average population of those counties is 383,367. And 2 Illinois counties, Will and Champaign, use the system of county elected executive, where the average population for those 2 counties is 449,467. Clearly, Will is a lot bigger than Champaign County since we're only 209,000. But the message here is that larger counties are moving to stronger leadership forms of governance, with the county elected board chair being the most popular. And just for your information, for the purposes of this study, we did not include Cook County because there's a whole separate section of the statutes that dictates how Cook County government works that doesn't pertain to any of the other 101 counties in Illinois. So elected executive versus countywide elected board chair. The elected executive position is granted responsibility and authority for the day-to-day operations of county government. And as I mentioned earlier, that can be oversight of up to $130 million budget, up to 1,000 employees. And to be elected, there are no statutory requirements for that individual to have any, experience or expertise for that responsibility. The elected executive is not a part of the county board, and therefore this position is not structured to provide leadership to the county board. And the elected executive creates another bureaucratic level of decision-making in an already complex county government structure. The countywide elected board chair is structured to be the leader of the county board. Under the countywide elected board chair structure, the county board generally hires a professional county administrator who has education and experience, qualifying them to manage the day-to-day operations of county government on behalf of the county board. The elected executive has a great deal of autonomy in managing day-to-day operations of county government, which results in a far less transparent system because the executive can make decisions about hiring and structure for offices and things like that without going to the county board. And when a county administrator has that responsibility, it's done all under the oversight and direction of the county board and policies that have been adopted by the county board and are very available, to the public to review and to see. In comparing these two types of governance, the independent county elected officials have a history in Illinois of engaging in disputes with the county board. This has led in many instances in other counties throughout the state to litigation and dysfunction of operations within county government. The elected executive form of governance creates just another independent elected official with the potential for the same dispute and dysfunction, which is basically a structural deficiency for the operation of day-to-day operations of county government. And just by comparison, this structure, compare it to city structures, you don't typically see city officials suing their city councils.
And I just add that these disputes between elected officials, and in one county it might be the county clerk, in another county it's the sheriff, in another county it's
the treasurer. Yeah,
the treasurer.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a question of the personality or the person in one of these offices. It's a question of the fact that the structure says that these officials are independent elected officials and have the right to operate and manage their office without, well, they have the independent right to do that. And the county board has obviously some ways of impacting this. They have to approve of the budget, but it's just not, I guess in my experience with counties, there's almost always some feud going on that creates some level of dysfunction.
Kathy, did you have a question?
Yes, and it's just a question. So it just occurred to me for the first time that an elected county board chair, does that mean that somebody, I had always envisioned that as somebody from the county board being elected by the voters to be county chair, but that's not the way it works, is it? Somebody just runs to be a county board chair and they're not elected from any district. Is that right?
That's correct. There would still be 2 members in our current structure, 2 members elected from each of the 11 districts, and then 1 individual would run countywide to be elected, kind of like the mayor.
Okay, thanks.
In a city structure. Some things to consider about the countywide elected executive versus board chairs. The elected executive form of government is the only statutory structure that enables a county to be home rule. Now, the other county in Illinois, which has the elected executive, Will County, does not have home rule. But in Champaign County, adopting home rule would require placing a referendum on the ballot to be approved by the voters. The Bellwether study favored the elected executive form of government because of the potential for home rule and how that could generate problem solving through increased revenue for the county. So that's just another issue for us to all be aware of with regard to the elected executive form of governance. In 2018, Champaign County elected our first executive, and she is nearing the end of her four-year term. However, before the November election in 2018, the Champaign County Board adopted rules, which it does every session of the county board. They have county board rules which dictate how they operate. And in these rules, they worked to further separate the executive from the board and maintain the position of county board chair, which if you read the statutes, you think if there's an elected executive, there wouldn't be a county board chair, but the county board rules that were adopted in 2018 maintain that position of county board chair, with the assumption that the county board chair would then continue to make appointments as stated in the county board section of the statutes, while the elected executive statute places those appointment responsibilities with the executive. So this has led to litigation and is the subject of a court dispute, which is now before the Illinois Supreme Court. In addition to that, legislation has been proposed in Springfield, which would give the county board chair appointment power in Champaign County only, and would assign that power to the executive in other elected executive counties, currently only will, but if there were more in the future, which further dilutes the intended role of the elected executive in Champaign County.
But we've got a couple questions, I think.
Okay.
Kathy and Teresa, I think, have questions. Kathy first.
My mistake again, sorry.
Oh, okay. Teresa, did you have a question?
This is just a monetary one. Who pays for these lawsuits?
The county.
So the
The county board is represented by a civil assistant in the state's attorney's office, but the elected executive statute gives the elected executive the authority to have her own counsel, and that counsel is paid for by the county as well.
Okay.
The elected executive statute grants authority to the elected executive to place items on the county board agenda. But in Champaign County, since we've had our elected executive, when the county board disagreed with discussing or acting on an item placed by the executive on the agenda, the county board simply voted to amend the agenda at the beginning of the meeting and remove those items so that they were not given any consideration. The Champaign County Board has also recently reduced the salary for the elected executive to the smallest salary of its elected officials to become effective on December 1st, 2022. Now, arguably, the elected executive job is one of the biggest jobs of the elected officials in Champaign County, with the exception probably of the state's attorney and the sheriff. But now, the county board sets the salaries for all of the elected officials before their terms begin. And now that salary is the lowest. It went from $121,000 to $70,000. And this is another example of the Champaign County Board not recognizing or treating this position with the full level of responsibility which is intended in the statutes. So our County Governance Task Force preliminary recommendation is that the countywide elected board chair would provide stronger leadership and less dysfunction for Champaign County government. And the task force supports a referendum to eliminate the elected executive form of government and transition to a countywide board chair form of government.
Anne.
A couple of questions. If you have to have a county executive form of government in order to have county home rule, are you saying there are no counties in Illinois that have home rule?
That's correct.
Well, Cook County has.
Cook County does, but
Yeah,
again, they
Cook
operate
County
in
is,
separate.
we know, is its own thing.
Yeah.
And do we know why Will County has decided not to go for home rule?
I don't know. I can tell you that it wasn't one of the first times it was placed on the ballot, Trish, back in the 70s and 80s in Champaign County, it included home rule.
That I don't know. I don't know.
It did not include home rule when it was placed on the ballot here, though, and obviously it did not when it was placed on the ballot in Will County, and I don't know why Will County has not gone for it.
I guess from the previous slides, I thought the recommendation was going to be to maintain the elected executive. And now the recommendation you're saying is to eliminate the elected executive and transition back or transition to a countywide board chair. So if you can again identify the reasons why this would be the recommendation of the task force, because a lot of the previous information seemed to point toward the direction, in my mind anyway, of an elected executive.
You want to go back to the slide before this, Deb?
Okay, I know how to go backwards.
I have a quick question. Is the county-wide elected board chair a member of the county board once they are elected?
Yeah, well, they're the chair for the county board. Yes.
So as opposed to the county executive position, which is
Right.
not a part of the board, but the
Exactly.
county elected board chair would be a part of the board
Right.
and hopefully
Now-
better able to work with them.
Yes. The county board chair and the elected executive, I'm sorry, I don't know how to get it back.
So you've got what you could stop sharing your screen and go out and come back in, or or we could just describe them.
That would
Yeah,
be fine.
I was
Right,
going to
because-
describe to Ann in answer to her question, the things that we've pointed out. So, Ann, we've talked about how this creates another elected position within county government, which leads to dysfunction. As we've talked about, typically in the state of Illinois, there's a history of dispute between elected officials and the county board. And we've seen that in this instance with the elected executive over the first term, over the past 4 years. We are in litigation. There's a lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court, and legislation has been proposed and is pending, which, separates Champaign County from the other elected executive counties, changing basically what the statutory intent was for an elected executive. And this county board has not really recognized the full intent of an elected executive, which has basically limited the elected executive's ability to do what the statutes intend. And so I think what we're saying is we think there is, this is basically dysfunctional, and there's a lot of there's not a lot of cooperation. And the reason for our recommendation for a countywide board chair is that it's more streamlined. It's not another level of, bureaucracy within county government, and would hopefully work more effectively than the way this has been working. Trish, feel free to add.
Yeah, essentially the county executive is another independent elected official.
Yeah.
And as an independent elected official, it has arisen on in these multiple different ways, disputes with the county board over who's got the power. That's essentially what it comes down to. If you had a county board wide elected board chair, there isn't disputes over the county board power. Okay, they would presumably assert as much power as they have, and the county board chair would be the leader. The statute is not structured for the executive to be the leader of the county board. And
I'm
so
not
that-
arguing in favor of the county executive. What I'm wondering was how to make the positive case that having a countywide elected board chair brings many positive benefits to the operation of county government. And I'm just wondering if there are examples of that from other counties.
Well, there's 9 other counties that have a countywide elected board chair form of government, and those are, DuPage, McHenry, basically the collar county, the larger collar counties, and they do it because they need it. They need a higher level of administration to be to operate, and the elected board chair has that ability to, through a county administrator, offer that higher level of administration. Carol.
Trish and Deb, I'm wondering how you feel about the fact that local newspapers are not present like they used to be. Like Tom Kasich used to be at every county board meeting, and now there's not anybody sitting in that room, like reporting back. And Deb, I was shocked to learn how they have reduced the county executive salary. That should have been like front page newspaper story, but I feel like so much of what's happening is being missed. I'm wondering how you guys feel about that.
Well, I think that's absolutely true, because Tom Kasich was at every county board meeting for the last 10 years I was administrator, and he covered what was going on in county government. And that is not as transparent, it's not out there, but that's just a reality of, limitations on the news media, especially local news media in today's world. But yes, I think you're right. I think people were more aware of some of these kinds of issues when there was, regular, reporting on it.
For instance, the county has just bought the county plaza building, and like, how many people know that? I mean, and why did they do it? And what were the reasons? And what was the discussion? And just without newspaper reporting, these things sort of just slip under the radar, really. Let's see. Anybody else have any more questions? One of the things, Trish, Carol, just to get back to your question, that's certainly something that I think a lot of people are puzzling over. How do we learn about our government? The whole idea of being voters is that you have some information on which to base your decision. And without local newspaper reporting, there's there's very little consistent reporting in that the average citizen would know about. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we've solved that problem yet. I mean, I don't think we've moved to another way of finding out the information. And so it's kind of a gap. And maybe that's a reason why people don't feel as connected to their government as they used to. They just don't know the people. They don't hear their names in the newspapers. They don't see what kind of votes they make, that kind of thing. The less you know about what's happening, the less connected I think you are to it. And that is definitely a problem of democracy. Okay, anybody else? Kathy?
Yeah, Trish, so if we have a county board elected official that takes the county board to 23. Yeah. And I had another question. If we go back to the auditor.
It takes 23 for the next 10 years. Every 10 years, the county board gets to decide how many members it has and how many districts it has. So that is something else that we were thinking about in this process, but it's a decision that's 10 years down the road. So we decided to put it aside for a little bit.
I wondered on the auditor position, did you have any information on the counties that appoint or elect? You had a lot of that kind of information, I think, on the coroner or the county board, but there wasn't really any, whether there was one prevalent that other counties.
There's only 10 counties that have an elected auditor. And the question of whether to eliminate the elected auditor has been raised in these counties on occasion. I'm not sure, the recorder's office had been abolished in a couple, I'm not sure about the auditor, but we will follow up on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know that some counties have, in the last 10 years, eliminated elected auditors, but we could get that information.
Anything else? So do you guys feel more informed?
I feel just a little bit depressed.
It's like, that's, I mean, I think that's why Deb and I were so insistent about doing this. Something has to be done. I mean, to let the situation continue to sort of fester seemed not responsible, and so whatever.
I have one last question. Like, how soon could a referendum be put before the voters about this issue of the elected?
The county board can put it on the ballot at any time by a vote. To put it on the ballot through a petition of the voters would require a fairly large number of signatures. I think it was what, 10% of the voters in the last general election.
It's one of the highest levels of signatures required. It was, yeah, based on the last general election percentage of voters.
So we're not talking about November then?
We are not talking about November.
Okay.
There was, there was some discussion, rumors, so to speak, that the Democrats were going to put the question on the ballot in November, but apparently they're no longer considering that. Claudia? You have your hand up, I guess.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot to unmute though. So is there a statute that defines what an elected county board chair what qualifications and what the job responsibilities are? Or I don't understand. I mean, it'd be like you said, like a mayor. So is there a definition of what those duties are and what kind of person you would want to elect for that position?
You know, when you elect the county executive, you assume you're someone who's taking over the day-to-day operations of the county.
Right, not the county executive.
But when the county board chair is not structured like that, it's
okay. So they would have an administrator. Okay, so it would be some. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So similar, I guess, like a okay. Okay. Thank you.
But no special qualifications. It's the same as the same qualifications that you have to run for county board.
Okay.
Which is basically residency.
Right. Okay.
Trisha?
Yeah, this is some disturbing information about, you know, how dysfunctional it is right now. So thank you.
So just to be clear, once again, 22 people are on the board. There is another place on the ballot for everyone in their district to vote for a county board chair.
Not under the system that we have.
No.
But
if we got rid of the executive, then that's what would happen. No.
It would be on every ballot.
Every ballot.
There would be probably primaries, but then there would be, you know, on every ballot, just like when you vote for state's attorney or you vote for treasurer or, you know.
Right. So I would vote for my 2 county board reps. And if a Republican and a Democrat were running for the county board chair position, I would also vote for that. Right. And that person would have voting rights on the board? No. You were saying it's like a mayor, so no.
Right. They have the ability to break a tie.
Okay.
So if there is a tie vote by the board, otherwise they don't vote at the board meetings. Now, county board chair is typically also an ex officio member of all committee meetings, which again, you know, elected executive is not. So the board chair would be more engaged with, the county board in its work.
And probably the one doing the agenda for the county board meetings.
Yes.
Okay.
But almost always the agenda is based on issues that are coming out of committees of the county board. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, we will definitely be coming back to you with this issue. We're not sure whether we're going to be prepared to have the final report in time for this annual meeting, but we're continue to work on it so that it will be presented to the membership at some point. And hopefully, I would like to thank Kathy Emanuel for her very excellent articles on the voter. We probably need to pull them all out and put them together on this and feature them in terms of this issue and this discussion, because they're very comprehensive, and sometimes it's easier to take it in little by little than all at once. Okay, anything else, Deb?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening. And it seems discouraging, but on the other hand, we have a group of citizens who's interested in solving this problem, and hopefully our goal is to keep politics out of it as much as possible. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
See you later.
Thank you very much. It was
Very good
helpful.
information. Thank you.